Colorado is running out of COVID-19 options that don't start with lock and end with down. Few counties are trying an extreme new step. Fact is, a solution today means the worst is still weeks away. Colorado did not just automatically become awesome at elections. Are you listening, America? And some of our neighbors would like to have a word with you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Let's end our week with thanks. Next. If COVID-19 was a pre-election hoax, then it would be gone by now. Turning our back on the virus and wishing it away worked, it'd be gone by now. But Colorado is climbing toward a record 1,000 hospitalizations, and deaths in our state are now increasing in a clear weekly trend. So Denver's going to try a curfew of sorts, asking people to be home by 10 o'clock at night to prevent get-togethers. Now, of course, a droplet swapping happens just as easily by day if people don't keep their distance. So we asked city leaders, are we inevitably headed for another lockdown?
There's no definite path to how we get these numbers down. I don't know that a stay-at-home order is imminent, but I know that we've implemented a lot of strategies to try to get these numbers down. And if we run out of strategies, that could be possible that the state would place the city of Denver or perhaps the entire state under a stay-at-home order.
Sure sounds like Denver doesn't want to go first this time. C says, unlike a traditional curfew, you're not required to stay indoors after 10 o'clock. You can walk the dog, go for a run or whatever. The order does ban fans from college and high school sporting events, puts a hold on organized youth and adult sports leagues. This goes into effect on Sunday. It will be lifted for one day, Thanksgiving, then put back in place. It will remain in effect until at least December 7th. Meanwhile, Adams County is implementing a 10 p.m. curfew starting tomorrow. Tri-County Health says they're going to do that for at least 30 days. So we're now up to 936 COVID patients in Colorado's hospitals. Okay, look at the slope of the line. We were at 663 patients a week ago, and that trajectory indicates that we are going to strain hospital capacity far more than we did during the spring peak. Yesterday, our positivity rate for testing was just under 11%. Our weekly average has now passed 10%. Public health experts will tell you that that means that for all of our testing, it is not enough to identify contagious people to keep them from spreading it, whether or not they themselves feel sick. Skyrocketing case counts also prove that. More than 3,100 new cases yesterday, more than 2,700 a day is our weekly average. Now, a lockdown would devastate small businesses that burned through their reserves earlier this year and can't count on getting more federal help. I talked with our in-house COVID-19 expert, Chris Vanderveen, about another issue, and that is the lag time between if we took drastic action and then the impact on the virus. What's the stopping distance of the truck? If we look up tomorrow and say deaths are headed out of control, lock it down now, the truck doesn't stop immediately.
No, and sort of look at it from a case to hospitalizations perspective. If cases were to peak today, we would likely still see the hospitalizations continue to go up for another 2 weeks. And that's really the concern right now. We're right around 900 patients right now in Colorado, but we're likely to see over 1,000 by next week. So again, if cases stop tomorrow, hospitalizations would go up for another 2 weeks, and you wouldn't see the impact on deaths for another 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks after that. We talk a lot about this, that data lags. This is the meaning of that. If things got safe today in terms of cases, deaths would still go up for another 6 weeks.
Lastly, Chris, I keep replaying in my mind a note that I got yesterday from a Next viewer who emailed in to say, the state is asking me to give up what I need most in my life right now, that Thanksgiving is coming, and these are the 15 people that I want to gather for my own mental health. Ignoring these public health orders and common medical sense is killing people, and following these orders is killing people.
I don't think we've talked enough about that on our newscast. I think this is a mental health crisis that this country is going into, has been going into for a number of months, and it can't be downplayed. Now, what the solution to that is, I don't know. But there are people that are suffering not just physically, not just economically, but mentally as well. And we have been living our lives confined by space over the last 6, 7, 8 months. And what is the long-term impact of that going to be for many, many months to come?
My full conversation with Chris includes the discussion of the choices that Chris and I have personally made right now. That's on the next YouTube channel. Tonight's next question comes from Ann, Brad, Daryl, Steve, others. All wanted to know if the field hospital at the convention center is still open, when it might take patients, and how much it's cost. Our Anusha Roy got answers from the governor and the state's emergency management chief.
We are absolutely inching closer every day towards needing an alternate care capacity.
Let's get to the first question. What is the status of the convention center? It's essentially on standby, and if it's needed.
The convention center specifically for patients recovering from COVID. And what we hope to do is decompress the hospital so they can continue to see all types of patients.
There are two other sites on standby, St. Mary Corwin in Pueblo and the St. Anthony site in Westminster. They would serve the same purpose as the convention center, as well as be set up to take in patients from long-term care facilities. That leads us into our next question. When would they start housing patients? As you might imagine, there are a lot of factors, but here's a bird's eye view.
The first, they'll activate their patient transfer protocols.
Hospitals running low on capacity and resources will move patients to hospitals that do have space, and that is already happening.
Combination of COVID and just normal patient density. Then, as that becomes exhausted, they'll start converting.
Current projections show the state could exceed ICU capacity by late December. It could happen even sooner if we see less social distancing and people taking fewer precautions, especially as we head into the holidays.
And when that becomes stressed, we will begin to activate the alternate care sites.
The immediate danger is on the ICU bed side.
As for cost, the state says the lease for the Colorado Convention Center is $60,000 a day, $12,000 a day for St. Mary Corwin, and $7,800 for the St. Anthony site.
I often refer to that as, it's our healthcare system insurance policy.
So most of that is paid through federal dollars. The roughly 25% left can be covered through federal grants and through the state emergency fund as well. So to be completely clear, these sites we were talking about, they have not been used throughout the pandemic. They are not activated right now. In fact, Kyle, next week there is a practice session coming up. They're essentially going to practice scaling up and running through that process.
I mean, what do they say to you in terms of how long it would take to spin these up if they needed them?
Ideally, they would like a couple of weeks heads up. That's why they're in constant communication about hospitalization, so they can actually project out and plan. They also said, though, if need be, they can scale up sooner than that.
All right. Anusha Roy reporting. Thank you, Anusha. America's election process is proceeding in an orderly, albeit slow, way in terms of counting the record numbers of mail-in votes. NBC's projections haven't changed in 2 days, but Joe Biden now leads in well more states than he would need to defeat President Trump. The president's team continues to claim that the election was rigged and stolen without providing evidence. Biden's holding leads in Nevada and Arizona. He has jumped ahead and pulling away in Georgia and Pennsylvania. PA alone would give him the presidency. We could see some states, perhaps even the whole race, called later tonight. Healing northern Colorado after the two largest wildfires in state history is in part a race to protect the drinking water supply up there. And you have been continuing your generosity for our neighbors impacted by the fires by funding the erosion mitigation work to shore up those hillsides before spring rains bring them sliding down into the rivers and reservoirs. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, we'll shoot you the link to donate to this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign. The Community Foundation of Northern Colorado kicked it off with a $5,000 anonymous donation, and then you came in $5, $5, $5, $5, and you've raised almost $30,000 in 2 days. Colorado knows how to count mail-in ballots because we used to be really bad at elections. What new hobby have you picked up during the pandemic?
I learned crocheting from my grandma and YouTube.
Not only did he learn that, he figured out how to face a fear by turning it into a business. Next. You know how Colorado became a national leader in how to count mail-in ballots? By being really, really bad at elections in 2006 and 2008. Our Marshall Zellinger looks at how Colorado figured it out, while states like Pennsylvania are struggling.
Could you imagine if a state like Colorado, with 3.3 million ballots cast, did not start counting until Election Day?
Denver had 1 million cards that they had to scan because it was a 3-card ballot. So election officials across Colorado would probably be still processing for another week or two.
You've seen Amber McReynolds a bunch lately. The former Denver elections director is now the head of the National Vote at Home Institute. She spent part of her year trying to get other states to expand mail ballot access and allow for counting to happen earlier.
Experts like myself have been putting proposals in front of these legislatures to change it. And the best we could get in Michigan was 1 extra day on Monday. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, their legislative bodies would not extend the time.
In Pennsylvania, mail ballots could not be processed until Election Day. Arizona could start 14 days early. In Colorado, state law says 15 days early. And it's a good thing because Colorado received 3.1 million ballots by mail or drop box. Just shy of 200,000 voted in person.
Well, in most states, and Colorado is a good example, election officials can receive and process ballots right when they start coming in. And some states have expanded that even this year. Florida, Georgia, Minnesota, Iowa, they all recognized they had a challenge and they expanded it.
Yet Colorado has not always been the example to follow.
To wait 2.5 hours or more is really difficult for people.
It takes about 4 hours.
In 2006 and 2008, long lines from computer problems and problematic registration verification led to changes. Eventually, all mail ballots and allowing counting to start 15 days prior to Election Day.
Do you need to screw up an election to reform your election laws?
Sometimes. That certainly happened in Florida.
Ah, yes. Florida 2000, an election that hung on hanging chads.
They've spent 20 years trying to recover from the reputation that they had after Florida 2000, and they made various improvements. In fact, most voters in Florida voted by mail. They also allowed and expanded the amount of time that their election officials could process ballots in advance.
I'm just kidding. I'm real time today. One other footnote on Pennsylvania. Lawsuits have stalled the counting there because the state had said it would accept ballots that came in today through 5 p.m. Pennsylvania time, even if they had a postmark by Election Day. But Kyle, you know who else is still counting ballots? Colorado and just about every other state. You just don't notice because the major races like president and Senate are not close races. Colorado won't finish counting until Wednesday.
I'm still laughing at you
Thursday.
imitating your glitchy self from the last 2 weeks. Also, can we just discuss how weird it is and how quickly our brains have been reconstituted to see crowds of people, like those voting crowds in 2006 and 2008, and be like, what are you people doing standing next to each other? That's so dangerous.
Who knew that in 2008, when we screwed up that election, that we would be in good standing 12 years later when we didn't want to be standing in lines like that?
Okay, so I'm going to put a disclaimer on this next question/comment that facts people don't like are still facts. They're not opinions. One thing that people have to keep in mind about how our state works with voting versus others is that in a lot of states, Republicans as a strategy try to make it as difficult as possible for as many people as possible to vote, and then make it as difficult as possible to count those votes. Colorado Republicans have been part of this process. They have been part of the solution here.
And you look at the states like Utah that also buy into this. I learned from Amber McReynolds today, maybe you know this from your time out east, that there are not a lot of ballot issues that show up on ballots on the East Coast, that you don't really have issues show up. It's just legislatures decide what happens to the people. So your ballots aren't even that long. So it's not like, even if you mailed it to someone, they don't have as much effort that they have to put into it as we do when we've got 3 cards, both sides. It'd be very simple and efficient with smaller ballots on the East Coast.
That is interesting. I don't remember much from my time back east. I was a child, and then I was kind of a wastrel in college. Thank you, Marshall.
After a week of 70-degree temperatures here in Denver, big changes on the way. We'll be talking about a cool-off and a little snow up in the mountains. Tonight, an extremely mild evening with the cloud cover in place. Tomorrow will be our last day in the 70s here in Denver. A warm and windy Saturday as we wait this next storm system as it barrels in across the Great Basin, bringing us a windy start to the weekend and some cooler temperatures on the backside on Sunday. Looking ahead toward tomorrow, a little bit of light snowfall near the San Juans. The rain extends up toward northwestern Colorado Colorado as the afternoon rolls on, but really the big winner out of this storm, it's going to last a couple of days. The San Juans, where we have winter storm warnings with potentially 1, 2, 3 feet of snow possible. We stay in the 40s here in Denver next week.
Kids these days with their video games and their TikToks. Nothing but screen time with these youths.
Sometimes I zone out and I just keep crocheting.
Turns out this young man is starting a business while facing his biggest fear. Next. Anybody else pick up a pandemic hobby? Some new way to occupy your time? A 9-year-old started a small business and faced his fear.
Sometimes I zone out and I just keep crocheting.
He's a very speedy crocheter. His hands are constantly moving, constantly going.
My name is Kai and I'm 9 years old and I really love crocheting.
Kai is one of the most thoughtful brothers you could ever imagine.
I think I've been crocheting for maybe 3 months or maybe 4.
I would say 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, I would say 4.
He decided to start making bumblebees.
I'm making a large bee, one of my people's orders right now.
He primarily makes them as gifts and little keepsakes for people.
My business is called Kai's Crochet Creations.
Kai has been running his business since probably August, when he sold his first bee at a garage sale for $1.
My teachers started, teachers at my school started ordering them. And it just got crazy because I got so many orders.
He's been super busy.
My mom makes the labels and my sister manages all my money.
I do get a cut. He offered me 1/4 of the profits.
So now I have to be crocheting 24/7.
I swear we don't lock him in the basement.
I think I'm the only one in my school that crochets.
He's a very self-motivated little man, and he's so passionate about it and so good at it. It's amazing.
I love that. Few someones actually, would like to thank you. Next. The good news to close out this Friday is a thank you for your generosity toward Coloradans impacted by wildfires. More than $750,000 raised from viewers of this program over 3 weeks. Started with $500,000 for the Red Cross of Colorado. Money that it is pledged will be spent only here in Colorado. Red Cross offered this word of thanks for you.
Your donations have helped us provide almost 28,000 overnight stays for people impacted by the Colorado wildfires. Thank you, Kyle, and everyone.
I am a volunteer firefighter with Glen Haven Area Volunteer Fire Department. I was evacuated from the town of Glen Haven, and I thank the Red Cross very much for being able to put me up.
Erica writes in tonight, as a nurse who's seen the impacts of the COVID-19 virus on the long haulers especially, I appreciate your take on this. She writes, there are no easy answers. There are a lot of factors involved, but overwhelming the healthcare system is very scary and real possibility. Trevor, who I don't believe is a nurse, but is very confident because he's a man, writes, it's a virus. What do you think we should do? Let this bleep run its course. Here's one way to think about it. Set the virus aside. If somebody came to you and said, to save small businesses in Colorado, we need you to hang close to home for a couple weeks, would you do it? I'm going to.